All right, let's look at the world title fight. Islam Makhachev versus another world champion, Alex Volkanovski. So I got to tell you, right, I mean, there's so many different ways to look at a fight, and what you enjoy about it can be very personal to you. One of the things that I enjoy about this is the rankings committee is going to be put to the fire. I mean, not for nothing, I seldomly can get around the quiet, anonymous rankings committee and the terrible job that they do without getting called out. Like, we don't have anything in this space that we don't call out, right? It's kind of hard to get in. I mean, you get referees get their feelings hurt and judges get their feelings hurt. We have a rankings committee that is unnamed, that by rumor could even be done by a computer program. Now, that is not the case, but I'm sharing with you, they're so unnamed and so spoke about that rumor is allowed to exist and won't be stopped. And that very rankings committee says that Volkanovski is not as good as Islam Makhachev. So, and they've gone back and forth on this, by the way, right? It comes out every Tuesday at 9 a.m. And I just like when that gets pressured, because back up to their first fight, Islam was bringing the belt, but Volk was bringing GOAT status. And Volk said that it's one of the great things that Volk has ever done as far as a promotion of one of his own fights. And it came out organically and it was natural, but it was great. It wasn't just everything's on Islam. You have the ability to lose the belt. I have no ability to lose a belt. Right? Imagine that from Volk's spot. But what does that do for us, the audience? If there's no risk, what do we care? If you're not risking something, what do we care? Now you're just an interchangeable mediocrity going out there and fighting, but you happen to be doing it in a main event. It can't just be all rewards. There has to be something on it, Haas. So it was a big deal when Volk said, you bring the 55-pound belt, but I'm going to bring the ranking. So when that fight got done, for a moment, the rankings committee kept them the same. They gave a grace due to the weight deficiency shown by Volk in comparison to the competitiveness of the contest. But they've gone back and forth on that. And then, not knowing what to do, they just moved both guys down and put Jon Jones up. Jon Jones has never punched a heavyweight or been punched by a heavyweight. And they put him at number one anyhow. And they might have it right, but they might not. And it's one of the things that I enjoy about the contest, right? And so the other thing I like to do is I like to go over to DraftKings and see what those guys are saying. Because I remember the first fight in Perth, it was 3-1 Islam. And 3-1 Islam is the exact same odds when Islam fought Charles Oliveira for the belt. Islam was favored to beat Charles 3-1. And he went out and he did exactly that. What I mean by that, when you have 3-1 odds aren't saying that the audience fully expects a finish, but it definitely leans and trends in the direction of a finish. 3-1, you're talking about a domination. 4-1, you're expecting a finish. 5-1, it would be a surprise if there was not a finish. And I only bring that because it was anything but, right? Volk went out there and he defended himself. And he fought through a number of positions. His conditioning was every bit as good as we always expected it to be. The flip side to that coin is Islam's was just as good. So I wanted to see what the boys and girls over at DraftKings, now having evidence, it's no longer a guess of how these two are going to do. Now that we have the evidence of how they're going to do, you're not necessarily basing the fight on who you think the better fighter is. You're also taking into consideration momentum coming out of that fight. There was so many things that were going Volk's way. But then you also have the adage of guy had a good night. And DraftKings, that is experts within everything sport, see good nights all the time. It's what dreams are made of. But it wasn't a good enough night. And are you going to use that as a springboard and get better? Or is that going to be where you exist in your finest moment, you plateau and stay there? Meanwhile, Islam found himself in the worst position an athlete can, which is he found himself in a competition that turned out to be harder than he expected it to be. So now that Islam is armed with that information and knows what he's getting into, can he make the appropriate adjustments to widen the spread? And this is what Chael's wondering. This is all Chael's question when I go over to DraftKings. knowing it used to be 3-1, knowing it went off in Perth for their first battle at 3-1. What is DraftKings going to say now? Because the rankings committee said that Volk is better. They acknowledged that Islam won, but they said that Volk was better. They had him ranked in front of Islam. So I'm just wondering what the odds makers at DraftKings say. And they've got it at about a 2.5 favorite towards Islam. And 2.5 surprises me, considering the last one was 3-1. It surprised me. I would not have been shocked had Volk become the favorite just slightly. It's not what I would have predicted for you. I wouldn't have been shocked when I went to DraftKings if that's what I read. So I got to make some calls, right? I know some inside gambling guys and guys that helped us set this line initially. And it's only an initial line. You guys do the rest. That's one thing that so many people don't understand about the odds. The odds maker in the bookie only sets the initial line. Your guys' money, it's math after that. But when I did make some calls to say, hey, how did we get to this? How do we get to negative 259 on Islam coming out of the gate? Said two things. They said, and this is not the guy that actually set the lines, but this is the guy that does work in that industry and sets lines. Said two things. First off, location matters. Location matters to the point that none of us can figure out why Charles pulled out of this fight other than he really didn't want to do it in Abu Dhabi. We're all aware that a little scrape that was done 10 days ago, per the commission rules, you can put some glue in there and you can go off and fight. Jake Paul did it 24 hours after the exact same cut happened in a little bit different place. We believe location matters to a point that Charles Oliveira won't even do the fight. We also believe location matters to a point that Perth helped Volk. And we think that was a driving factor in that excellent performance. And the other side is short notice. We don't think that Volk had time to get to the right size and that he was training accurately enough. And therefore, we favor Islam. And I'm only bringing that to you guys because that seems fair. Like, that seems really fair over at DraftKings. It also seems like a way to go and take their money, right? Hunger absolutely matters. Volk has called Islam out. Nobody else has called Islam out. You guys can't tell me that. Justin Gaethje got as close as anybody has, where when he beat Poirier, he demanded a title fight. But he didn't call out Islam. There's a big difference. Calling out Islam versus calling for a world title fight, there's a very big difference. If you go study all of Gaethje's interviews, I'm sure at some point his mouth said the word Islam Makhachev. I won't take that from him, but in a broad stroke, there hasn't been any 55-pounders to call him out. He's a very intimidating guy. People don't want to compete with him. Well, Volk hasn't said anybody's name but his name. In fact, when Volk finally went after Ilia Topuria, he said, because I don't want to have to wait that long for Islam. I can still fight Islam, but if it's going to be next year, I'll just fight this guy in between. Not to mention, I think that there's something very relevant to the fact that Islam sat. That's my opinion. But he is sat. That fight that I'm referencing in Perth was in, what was it, in March? You don't get better at something by not doing something. At the same time, with the training, with the dedication, with the discipline, with the lack of distractions, the lack of partying, the lack of other things, I understand that a layoff is going to affect Islam much less than other people. But if we're just sitting over here and we're just gossiping and talking about all of the different variables that go into this fight, I have seen more times, and I could give you more examples of surprises, but surprises get done when the guy gets brought in on short notice. Short notice has never been, you won't show me examples. I will show you plenty. Short notice has never been, I wasn't ready, my weight, my training, short notice has been nothing but helpful. The physicality and the grind of constantly focusing physically and mentally on something hurts a person. It hurts an athlete. A guy that can step in with a completely clear head, not what he was planning to do, not what he was thinking about. Paralysis by analysis does not bite him in the ass. More times than not, the last minute replacement, that's the guy in the best spot. Go ask Michael Bisping if he agrees with me. So DraftKings is putting down some pretty like odds, right? DraftKings like Islam 2.5 to 1, but DraftKings liked Islam 3 to 1 in the first contest. So I think that that's very interesting because DraftKings is they're admitting that they see this contest closer than they're admitting that they saw the first one. Do you feel if this contest is closer than the first one that you have the same outcome? No way. There's no way you have that. There was no room for error. There was no room between these guys. And now there's nothing but a little bit of time and space, and we're going to take that away by Saturday night as well.